Okay, so synthetic routes, the routes of these chemical reactions, as we discussed for aliphatic compounds. Then for aromatic compounds, these are the synthetic routes for aromatic compound. Example, you start with the benzene. So benzene, you use hydrogen and nickel as a catalyst. So hydrogen is added, it will convert into cycloalkane. If you want to convert into bromobenzene, you react with iron tribromide and bromine. This iron tribromide is basically a catalyst which first produce a bromine-free bromine electrophile, and then as a result, the reaction started. Or if you have a benzene ring, you use chloroalkane and anhydrous aluminum trichloride as a catalyst. This will result in a formation of alkyl benzene, a benzene ring with alkyl group. If you use sulfur trioxide, then benzene sulfuric acid. If you use concentrated nitric acid and a mixture of sulfuric acid, concentrated sulfuric acid, the purpose of a sulfuric acid, again, it is a catalyst for this reaction, produce an NO2 group or electrophile. If you have a benzene ring, you react with acyl chloride in the presence of anhydrous aluminum chloride as a catalyst, then it will also form the group C double bonded with ONCH3, because acyl chloride is there, so Cl and H is removed, so it will form a link with benzene. If we react this with sodium cyanide and sulfuric acid, then it's a nucleophilic addition reaction is there. This is actually a similar reaction of hydrogen cyanide reaction. If we use lithium tetrahydrodualuminate, then it's a reduction reaction. Reduction means uh, addition of hydrogen or removal of oxygen. Because if you remember, if you have a if ketone is there, ketone we can convert them back to alcohol by this reagent. If this we have nitrobenzene, nitrobenzene in the presence of tin and hydrochloric acid, it will form aminobenzene. And this aminobenzene, if we react with sodium nitride and hydrochloric acid less than 10 degree, it will form a disonium ion. And disonium ion, if we in the presence of sodium hydroxide and phenol, it will form azodine. This is azodine. If benzene ring is there, we react with acyl chloride, so it will form benzene amide group is there. Is it clear? These convergence of benzene. So you have to
Yeah.
learn. Yeah, you have to learn these synthetic routes. I'll share these slides with you so you can copy. Then SN1 mechanism, SN1 and SN2 mechanism as we compare. SN1 means nucleophilic substitution reaction, in which the rate of reaction depends on only one reactant, and SN2 means rate of reaction depends on both reagents. So for example, secondary or tertiary, because the attacking nucleophile does not find a space to attack. So first the bond breaking occur. As the bond breaking occur, it will produce a carbon cation surrounded by alkyl groups. Then the nucleophile will attack. When the nucleophile will attack, this will result in a formation of a racemic mixture, because both possibilities are there. So this will form both optical isomer. But in SN2, because there is a space available on the carbon, so the bond breaking and bond forming will take place at the same time. So this result in a formation of only one kind of enantiomer. The first one, SN2 result, because both possibilities are there. OH can attack from the left hand side or OH can attack from the right hand side. But in this case, the OH can attack from one side and the other side, the bond breaking will occur. So SN1 reaction result in a formation of a racemic mixture or racemate, where SN2 reaction, we have only one kind of enantiomer. and that enantiomer is opposite to the direction of the starting enantiomer. Is it clear?
Yeah.
This chapter, uh, things are, rather than writing many things, it's about the, just recall the ideas. Distillation, what is the organic technique? The distillation is there. So in general, way to separate the two substances which have different boiling point, we can use a simple distillation or fraction distillation. Simple distillation when we are obtaining a liquid from a solution. Fraction distillation when two miscible liquids are there. So what, in which case we use this? We use for conversion of primary alcohol into aldehyde. So when we supply heat to the primary alcohol in the presence of oxidizing agent, potassium dichromate and dilute sulfuric acid, so we use a limited amount of dichromate. Why? Because we don't want a complete oxidation of aldehyde. So when primary alcohol convert into aldehyde, aldehyde will have a low boiling point because it does not have the same type of intermolecular force as that of alcohol, which is having hydrogen bond. Then this is the condenser or a Liebig condenser, which the water jacket is there, absorb the energy and remove or take the energy. So we will have a distillate at the end. Why there is an opening at this side? This is to release the pressure. Otherwise, what happens if there was no opening here and you're supplying the energy, then it will build up a pressure of the vapor pressure will be there. It maybe one of the apparatus or one of the component present in this fraction or distillation may break or crack due to high pressure. So you have a round bottom flask, a thermometer, this three-way connection is there, then a Liebig condenser is there, and at the last you can have a round bottom flask or a beaker to collect that distillate. Then reflux condenser, if you want to convert, you want to make a complete oxidation of alcohol, primary alcohol to carboxylic, we use a reflux condenser and it is open at the top. Why? Because otherwise, if it was sealed, again the vapor pressure will be too high, then the apparatus might explode. So primary alcohol, it's not a direct conversion. Primary alcohol first oxidized to carboxylic, and then the carboxylic acid. Sorry, primary alcohol first oxidized to aldehyde, and then aldehyde oxidized to carboxylic acid. Anti-bumping granules are there. The purpose of anti-bumping granules, so it prevent a vigorous boiling or it make a boiling even. Otherwise, if it was no anti-bumping granule, then it will be uneven. Boiling will be there. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Then if you want to purify an organic liquid like the distillate which we obtain here, example, the substance which you obtain here or the distillate we obtain in the simple distillation. So in this case, it is not a pure substance, so we have to purify a substance. So what are the normal steps which we follow to purify a substance? So purifying an organic liquid, what we do, we put a distillate into a impure, the impure product into a separating funnel. So first we have a separating funnel. Then we wash the product by adding either a sodium hydrogen carbonate. What is the purpose of adding with sodium hydrogen carbonate? Because sodium, if any trace of acid is there, so that acid will react with sodium hydrogen carbonate and give off carbon dioxide. And to release the carbon dioxide pressure, we just open the tap or we shake the separating funnel or we tap the funnel so that the carbon dioxide, the gas will escape. Then we add a saturated sodium chloride solution. What is the purpose of adding a saturated sodium chloride solution? Because salt solution, the organic substance, some of the organic substance are miscible in a pure water, but in a salt solution, they are less soluble. So what will happen? It will create a two layer. One will be aqueous layer, another one is organic layer. So allow the layers to separate in the funnel. How we will know that? Because if there is an organic substance mixed with aqueous substance, the solution will be cloudy. But once the solution appears to be clear, that moment we will remove the aqueous layer from organic layer. Then run the organic layer into a clean, we'll remove the organic layer into a clean conical flask, and then we add a drying agent such as sodium sulfate. What is the drying agent should be unreactive, it should be solid at room temperature, and it should be unreactive. Unreactive in that sense, like it just have the tendency to absorb the moisture rather than any other chemical reaction occur. And then after adding a drying agent, we decant the organic layer and into a distillation flask, and we collect again. What we will do again distillation, redistillation, and we obtain a pure substance at its boiling temperature. Is it clear?
Yeah.
So these steps you have to learn. Then example, purifying an organic solid. If we want to, like if something is a solid, like example, we have this 2,4-dinitrophenyl hydrogen that's used to identify either a compound is aldehyde or a ketone. So in that case, it form a derivative of 2,4-dinitrophenyl hydrogen. So we use the technique which is redistillation or purify. So first what we do, dissolve the impure, like we have a solid, but that's impure organic solid. So we dissolve the impure solid in a minimum volume of hot solvent. So what is the reason why we use a hot solvent? Hot solvent so that maximum amount will dissolve. And why minimum volume? Like example, why very small quantity? Why not too much? Because if I take a larger volume of a solvent, then if I want to recrystallize, because if the quantity of the liquid is more, then the recrystallized solid will be less. Because if I have a greater amount of solvent, it will have greater tendency to dissolve the solute. So when I try to recrystallize, it will not recrystallize. That's why we should use a minimum volume of the solvent. And why hot? So an appropriate solvent which can dissolve both compounds and impurity when hot. So minimum volume is used to obtain a saturated solution and enable us for crystallization. And why hot? So that maximum substance can dissolve. Then hot filter solution through a filter paper. So when we carry out a hot filtration, this will remove any insoluble impurities, and then we cool down the filtrate. When we cool down, so what will happen? The solid will recrystallize, but the impurities will remain dissolved. And then we can use a suction filtration. What is a suction filtration? If we filter at a high pressure, we call that as a suction filtration or Buchner funnel. So we remove the air from this, so it is fast. The advantage of this Buchner funnel or this filtration under a reduced pressure, it will be fast and will obtain a dry solid. Then wash the crystal with a distilled water to remove the soluble impurities, and then dry the crystal by absorbent paper or tissue paper or a filter paper. Is it clear, these steps?
Yeah.
So they ask these questions: why minimum volume is used, why hot. So an appropriate solvent which can dissolve both compound and impurity when hot, and minimum volume is used so that it enable us to recrystallize. Next, what is steam distillation? as you studied simple distillation, you studied fraction distillation or simple distillation. This is steam distillation. So in steam distillation, there is addition, like what we do, we add a steam, so it will form a vapors and take the substance and distillate is collected. What is the purpose of that? Normally steam distillation, because some of the substance can decompose on heating. So if a substance can decompose on heating, so steam, the normal supplying heat energy by a burner or electrical heater is not a good technique. So we use a steam distillation. So when we pass a steam, the vapors of the steam, like vapors are there, they will take the other substance. It will rise with the steam and condenses and collected here. So for a substances which can decompose at a high temperature, so we don't use the normal heating method, we use a steam distillation. So in a steam distillation, steam is passed into a mixture and the product vapor is distilled off with water and it condenses. The advantage of steam distillation, the product distilled at a lower temperature, which can prevent decomposition of a product if it has a high boiling point. Is it clear? So basically to avoid a substance, because when you supply a heat energy, the temperature of substance will increase. When if a substance is having a high boiling point, like example, if I say the boiling point of this a liquid which is here, I want to collect, the boiling point is 270 degrees centigrade. So I have to supply heat energy until it reaches its boiling point. And maybe what happens if the temperature is too high, the substance might decompose into another product. So the advantage of steam distillation, we don't reach the boiling point. We passes the steam, the vapor of the steam carry this substance together, a small proportion, and when it condenses, so here we'll have the product as well as the water. And then we can separate the aqueous substance from the organic substance as we discussed earlier. Is it clear? Any doubt in this?
No.
Then what is the solvent extraction? So simple solvent extraction, we use a separating funnel. So when mix organic solvent in oil water mixture in a separating funnel and distill to separate the oil from organic solvent, like example, this is the whole process we already discussed, the solvent extraction in this part. Like purifying an organic liquid is that's an example of solvent extraction. Then the safety and hazards. So hazard is a substance or a procedure that has a potential to do harm. And typical hazards are toxic, like something is toxic, it's a hazard, flammable, harmful. Risk is the probability or chance that it will harm will result from a use of hazardous substance or the procedure. So risk can be minimized. You can reduce the risk, but you cannot reduce the hazard. Hazard is something which is present. It will be there. So example, if something is irritant, like dilute acid or alkali, so what you can do, you can wear goggles. If something is corrosive, you can wear goggles as well or use gloves or lab coat. Something is flammable, keep away from naked flame. If something is toxic, wear gloves, avoid skin contact, wash hand after use. And something is oxidizing, keep away from the flame or easily oxidizing material. So these are the things which we are doing it to reduce the risk. So risk can be reduced, but hazard Like you can reduce the risk, but hazard is there. It has potential to do harm. Is it clear?
Yeah.
So if we use a low concentration, the hazard is there, but the risk will be minimized. Then melting point apparatus. This is a melting point apparatus. This is apparatus used to find the melting point of a substance. So how we find a melting point of a substance? First, we take a capillary, small capillary or a tube. So we take a small capillary or a tube. This capillary is open from both ends. So first, what we do, we close one of the end of the capillary. How we close practically? We place this one end above the flame. After placing above the flame, this is a glass capillary made up of glass. And then after placing it above the flame, we tap one of the end. So when we tap one of the ends, so one end will be closed. And in this capillary, what we do, we add a solid for which we are finding the melting point. Why we are using a capillary? Because we want a small amount of solid, so we don't have to supply too much heat energy. If I take an example, I take a china dish or petri dish, or I take a beaker or any container, it, I need a greater amount of solid. That's why we took a capillary, a small capillary, a very thin capillary is there, which is open from both ends. We close one of the end and place a or solid inside. And this capillary is connected, or we use a rubber band and attach this capillary with a thermometer. And this is a melting point apparatus. We supply the heat energy, heat absorb, and the liquid will absorb energy and that transfer energy to this solid. The moment when we appear the solid start to melt, we will record the temperature, and that temperature is a melting point of a substance. But for this case, the liquid which we are using should have a higher boiling point that of the solid which we use here, because otherwise the temperature of the liquid will not rise more than the boiling point. And it should be a colorless or a clear liquid, so we can see through and identify at what temperature the solid melts. Is it clear?
Yes.
The melting point apparatus. Same thing, measuring a boiling point. So it's a simple thing. You can have a container, the temperature at which you will observe bubbles coming out from the thing. So you can temperature remain constant. So you can say it is a boiling point. But the melting point apparatus normally they ask rather than boiling point, which is a very simple thing. The combustion analysis, using a combustion analysis, we can find the empirical formula. Like example, if you have a compound which contain 0.328 grams of compound which contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen was burned, it gives 0.216 gram of water and 0.880 grams of carbon dioxide. So what is the, how to work out the mass of a carbon dioxide? So first you work out the moles. Moles equal mass in gram over molar mass, so 0.88 divided by 44. You got the moles of carbon dioxide. And the simplest ratio between carbon dioxide and carbon, the simplest ratio is 1 is to 1, the mole ratio. Like one molecule of carbon dioxide contain one carbon atom. So if you have 0.02 moles of carbon dioxide, you will have 0.02 moles of carbon as well. Multiply by molar mass, you will get the mass of the carbon which is present in a compound. Same thing, using a water, you got the moles of a water, but the ratio, one molecule of a water contain two hydrogen. So ratio of the moles for hydrogen to water to hydrogen is 1 is to 2. So 0.024, it will be 2 times, so you'll get the moles of hydrogen. Multiply by atomic mass, you will get the mass of hydrogen in the compound. And how to work out the mass of the oxygen in the compound? you have, because this compound contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So total mass, subtract the mass of carbon and hydrogen, you will get the mass of oxygen. And to get the moles of oxygen, moles is mass in gram divided by atomic mass, because you're finding for moles of oxygen atom, you got the moles of oxygen. So moles of oxygen are there, carbon and hydrogen. Simple, divide by atomic mass, you already divided. You divide, take a simplest ratio. So when you take a simplest ratio, you divide by smallest value. So the ratio is 565. So the empirical formula for compound is C5H6 and O. So using a combustion analysis, we can identify or we can find the empirical formula of the compound. Is it clear?
Yeah.
And using the empirical formula, you can find the molecular formula, because the molecular formula is empirical formula times N. And what is N? N is molecular mass over empirical mass. So after knowing the empirical formula, you find the N. N is molecular mass, which is given 144, and empirical mass is 72. So 144 divided by 72. So value of N is equals to 2. So this 2 is multiplied with carbon, this 2 is multiplied with hydrogen and with oxygen. Their empirical formula, that's why the molecular formula is C8H16 and O2. Then using this, you can work out the identify, like first using a combustion analysis, you find empirical formula. Using empirical formula and the molecular mass, how you can find molecular mass? You can use a mass spectrometer. The mass spectrometer, the highest value of the, because this is a mass spectrometer, on x-axis you have mass to charge ratio, on y-axis you have percentage abundance. The one which is giving you the highest value for mass to charge ratio, that is the molecular ion peak. The one which is highest intensity, that's called base peak, but the highest mass to charge is called a molecular ion peak. Using a molecular ion peak and empirical mass, you can find N, and N is molecular mass. Molecular formula is empirical formula times N. So you can find molecular formula. Is it clear?
Sir, could you repeat this last part?
Look, using a combustion and analysis or using a percentage, you got the empirical formula. Empirical formula, divide by atomic mass, divide by smallest value, then a round off. You got the empirical formula, which is C4H8 and O. Then you need empirical formula, molecular formula. To get the molecular formula is empirical formula times N. What is N? N is molecular mass. So from where you get the molecular mass? For this, you have to use the mass spectrometer. Mass spectrometer, on x-axis, you have mass to charge ratio. On y-axis, you have percentage abundance, or the percentage of each peak. And here, mass to charge ratio. So different peaks you will obtain, but the one which is having the highest mass to charge ratio, that will be the molecular ion peak. So example, in this case, if it was 144, so molecular mass is 144. So molecular mass is 144, empirical mass is 72, molecular mass divided by empirical mass, you will get the value of N, which is 2 here. So value of N is 2, so 2 will be multiplied with carbon, with hydrogen, with oxygen. So molecular formula of this compound is C8H16 and O2. Is it clear?
Yes.
And using this now, because we want to work out the final structure, then we can use the infrared spectroscopy. And using an infrared spectroscopy, we can identify what kind of bonds are there. So as we already discussed, that it contains C8H16. So C8H16 and O2. But what is the bonds present? So using an infrared spectroscopy, you can identify the peaks, and you can, using a range of these peaks, the table will be there. You don't have to learn or memorize. So it shows it contains C double bonded and it contains CH. So this can be carboxylic or how we identify, because C8 oxygen is there, carbon is there, or hydrogen is there, so it can be carboxylic, it can be alcohol, or it can be carbonyl, or it can be an ester also, because C double bonded with O. These groups are there, but because there is C double bonded with O and but no OH peak, so it means it must be an ester. It cannot be carboxylic acid or alcohol because there is no OH peak is there. So using infrared spectroscopy, we identify the functional group. Then after identifying the functional group, we use a nuclear magnetic resonance or NMR, and we find how many hydrogen environments are there. So how many hydrogen environment? 1, 2, 3, and 4 hydrogen environments are there. And the intensity of the height of the each peak is representing the number of hydrogen in each environment. So this is giving you a 1 peak, but intensity is too high. So this shows, as we identify, it should be an ester. So it's C double bonded with O and O will be there. Now what we have to do, we have to identify that how the structure of this ester, how it exists. So there are 4 hydrogen environments, because the number of the peaks are showing the number of the hydrogen environment. 2 of them are singlets, does not, so means their neighbors does not contain any hydrogen. So what can be the possibility? Because the molecular formula, this is in the molecular formula of the compound was C8H16 and O2. So we have to arrange C8H16O2 in this manner using a table again, like the chemical shift. There's a singlet, and at 0.9, chemical shift of 0.9, when you check a data booklet, 0.9 is for methyl group, and it's a singlet for a methyl group. So what does it mean? How the methyl group can have a singlet or can give a singlet? It means it is attached to a carbon which does not have any hydrogen. That's why this is giving us singlet. Is it clear? This part, the first part.
Yeah.
The second part, the peak at a chemical shift of 1.2. So when you check a data booklet, a chemical shift of 1.2 means that the alkyl group is attached to CH3. This alkyl group can be CH2 or it can be CH. And what pattern it is giving? A triplet. So if it's giving a triplet, it means next to this group, there should be CH2. Why? Because the alkyl group, if it is next to this, it's giving a triplet. Triplet means it is split into, if this alkyl group, if it's giving a triplet, it means next to this, the neighbor contain 2 hydrogen. So which one is this? Basically, this is alkyl group, and next to that, it's giving a triplet. So this is an alkyl group or CH3 group, and next to that, it's giving a triplet, which shows that there are 2 hydrogen environment, because the number of the peaks are always n+1, the splitting pattern. So if I say I have CH3 group, and next to CH3 group, there is CH2 group. So how many peaks this will split into? Collectively, there's 1 peak, but how many it will split into? Because the neighbor contains 2 hydrogen, so it will split into 3, and you can see it is splitting into 3. So this you conclude that this is because of CH3 group, because the peak at 1.2 means there is a CH3 group next to alkyl. But what is that alkyl group? That alkyl group is CH2. Why? Because there is a triplet. So if there's a triplet, that alkyl group should have the neighbor should have CH2, so that this will give us 3 peaks. Is it clear? The second one?
Yes.
The third one, you are getting a singlet. So as it appears a singlet, again it shows, and the peak at 2.2 shows this C double bonded with O and O. So C double bonded with O, and H is for, so area of two suggest, like this part is suggesting that next to CH2, there is no neighbor because it is giving a singlet. So if there it's giving a singlet, so there is no neighbor for this. You can see this is giving a singlet. So why it is giving a singlet? Because the neighbor does not have any hydrogen. And the last one, when you check a chemical shift of 4, it means CHO, or the hydrogen which is bonded with carbon, that's responsible for this. And how many peak it dissociate or give out? It is giving 1, 2, 3, 4. So if it is giving out 4, this is actually because of this carbon. Because a neighbor is having 3, if a neighbor is having 3, it means it should give a 4 peaks, or it will split into 4. Peak with 1, but split into 4. But why, if I draw another structure, like example, this is according to the question, but if I draw another structure, example, so example, if I draw a structure, I want to arrange, if I say it was CH3, CH2, CH, CH3, CH2, C double bonded with O, CH2, and CH3. So in this case, how many hydrogen environments are there? This CH3, next to that is CH2 and another chain. So this is one hydrogen environment. This CH3 is another hydrogen environment. This CH3 is a third hydrogen environment. 4 hydrogen environment, fifth, because even these are CH2, but they are not identical because their neighbors are not identical. Fifth, 6 and 7 hydrogen environments are there, but this is only giving 4 peaks with a different splitting pattern. So means the other structure cannot be true. So what the best way to solve this question is, you will draw the structure and check which one it matches with. You got the point?
Yeah.
This need a practice, because first time you find it difficult, it need practice. There are practice questions in the past paper as well, in which you identify the number of the peaks, and using the peaks you identify the structure of a compound. So we bring all together, basically using a combustion analysis, we find the hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. Then using a mass spectrometer, we find the molecular mass using infrared spectroscopy. We find the functional group, the bonds. Then we bring all together using a NMR, or nuclear magnetic resonance. Then this is a test for different functional group, and Fehling or Benedict reagents. These are the tests for aldehydes. So this was the end of the unit 5, the last chapter. I'll share this presentation with you. So if anything you want to copy, you can copy. Any doubt related to the class today? Any doubt?
No.
Okay. So I'll end the session and share the recording. Next class, I will discuss the doubts related to acid, alkali, and so its equilibrium.